Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt. My name is Matt and I'm joined by Stefan and Ben to discuss Manchester United's imminent signing of centre-back Leny Yaro. The Frenchman seems to have chosen Manchester United over Real Madrid as Jim Ratcliffe's club close in on a deal worth up to €62 million, including add-ons. The initial €50 million fee would make Yaro the most expensive 18-year-old in footballing history and Manchester United's third most expensive centre-back. Stefan, have they chosen the right player to spend this kind of money on?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's impossible to really say when you're talking about a player this young who's, I think, got maybe 60 senior appearances to his name to date. So, we're talking about obviously a very young, very raw player, but a player who makes the move to Manchester with a huge amount of praise from French football and wider field. Reports to suggest that the Real Madrid were desperate to sign him as well. And it seems as though Man United have managed to kind of jump in front of them. And it's really worth pointing out that our colleague Ewan Robertson wrote a really good in-depth profile on Yoro on the Transfermarkt website. We'll stick in the description below, where he spoke to our French Ligue 1 expert, Ronan Karoff. And, I've just rhymed off some of the things that he said in that article just for viewers to see. The standout quote was perhaps him saying, the high demand in Yoro not only stems from his high-level performances, but also other qualities such as his incredible maturity and focus, which aren't always common in young professional players. And Ronan actually goes on to compare him to a young Raphael Varane, which I think is really interesting. Another thing that Ewan also points out is that if you actually look at all the defenders across European football, in which ones gained the most market value on Transfermarkt last year, Yoro was top by a good €5 million over the next best central defender, or next best defender rather. So we're talking about a young player here at the very top of his class, very top of his position, and not only a player that Man United need, but also one that Man United fans can get really excited about in terms of a very young player, can still be moulded into all sorts of types of, central defender, whether it's a ball-playing player or more of a kind of no-nonsense central defender. But I think the comparisons to Raphael Varane are perhaps quite apt, who in his heyday was just a player who never seemed to sweat, never seemed to get caught off guard, and really kind of glided through games. And I think Man United fans would bite your arm off for a central defender who looked like that last season. And if he can kind of make that step up to the Premier League with the same sort of composure and the same sort of maturity, then it looks like Man United have got a really smart signing on their hands.
Ben, Yaro isn't the only centre-back that Man United have been linked with and making bids for this summer with Matthijs de Ligt, who we've already spoken about on the channel, and Jared Branthwaite, also highly appreciated by Man United. I know there's, of course, financial factors that come into play when they decide which player to sign, but why do you think Yaro was the one where they've pulled the trigger first?
Yeah, I think it looks like quite a smart signing, doesn't it? I think it's clear that with the new ownership group, they're going to stop laying out huge fees for players coming towards the twilights of their careers, as we've seen recently with the likes of Varane and Casemiro. There's going to be a change in approach. And Yoro fits that, 18 years old. I think a right-footed centre-back, I think I made the point when we spoke about Branthwaite going there. A right-footed centre-back is something that's really key for me because I think when Lisandro Martinez is fit, he starts on that left side of defence. So they need someone to come in and complement him. And Yoro certainly could be that. He looks like he has bags of potential and he looks like he fits everything you sort of need in that modern-day centre-back. I think Stefan alluded to it there, but we've seen sort of the development of the best centre-backs in recent years. They don't dive into tackles. They're very composed on the ball. I'm thinking of the likes of Van Dijk and more recently Saliba. I guess two small potential concerns for Man United fans is he's still very young. You've mentioned he'll be the most expensive 18-year-old of all time. He's only really played one proper senior season under his belt. When Arsenal brought Saliba in at a similar age, he wasn't quite as well known as Yoro, but he ended up going back on loan for 3 seasons before Arteta then brought him into the first team fold and felt he had that experience to go into the Premier League. Because it's obviously a league that takes some time to adapt into, so it's going to be interesting to see if, as it looks like it will, this signing gets completed, whether he goes straight into that starting 11. And I guess another small area for concern is it's been quite clear throughout the summer that his first choice was Real Madrid. And obviously for every club, ideally, can't always be the case, but ideally you want to be that first choice. You want to convince that player that they want to come. And I think it's something that like a lot of top clubs look towards now. It's sort of been Man City's case. It's quite easy for them now because pretty much everyone wants to go and play under Pep at Man City. It's always been sort of that stable at Man City and Liverpool in recent years, and maybe Arsenal are starting to get there of only signing players that want to go there and are going to fully buy into things. So I guess that could be another cause for concern. But I think on the whole, it's a really exciting signing for Man United, and it looks like they're going to get one of the most exciting young centre backs in world football.
And on the point of Real Madrid, I think it's worth pointing out that they seem to be taken by surprise by Leny Yoro's decision. Up until last week, we were hearing that despite Man United having a bit accepted, that Madrid were still confident they could sign the player and were willing to wait until 2025 when his contract expired. But I think that maybe just goes to show the pulling power that Manchester United have again. And sticking with you, Ben, they do seem to have changed that recruitment approach in the last year or so, maybe since Jim Ratcliffe came in, with signings of young players like Leny Yoro, like Joshua Zirkzee and Rasmus Højlund as well.
Yeah, but it seems to me that it's more forced by the club. That Lille are basically saying you've got to go, right? Because they want to cash in on him. They don't want to lose a player of his talents for free next season. I would probably still say right now, as a young player, it's still so much turmoil at Man United. I'm not sure it would be my first choice if I had a lot of clubs looking for me. Obviously, historically, one of the biggest clubs in the world. Some could argue the biggest. And they'll always have that pull, Man United. But in terms of being a stable place that's going to develop your career, they've not shown that recently. And perhaps that will be something that changes under the new ownership group. But still, as a young player, I don't think it would be my first choice. And I probably get the impression Lille have sort of pushed him to make that move, maybe more than he wanted to. And Real Madrid would still be his first choice because Real Madrid aren't willing to pay that fee right now. And obviously, from Lille's perspective, it makes so much more sense to let him go now. Whether there'll be something in his Man United contract, maybe, that in sort of 2 years he can go for a certain release clause, maybe, and then go to Real Madrid. Seems mad that Man United would be used as a stepping stone club, but this is a team that came 8th in the Premier League last season, so that's potentially the way it is now. But yeah, Man United looks like they're going to get their man, and for Lille, the deal makes a lot of sense.
Stefan, what have you made of the transition in Man United's recruitment over the last year?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. And actually, I think Ben makes a great point about the fact that, we've got a player there who may eventually want to move on to Real Madrid. And then that could be seen as a negative, but it could also be seen as a positive. The makeup of their squad today has been players who've came from Real Madrid and have got nothing left to prove. So I think Man United fans would rather have young players who have their eyes on playing for clubs who are competing for the Champions League. And if Man United can't obviously fulfill that ambition, then that's on them. It's not on the players, and I'm sure the fans would much rather have players in the team with that kind of ambition going forward. But yeah, it's really interesting that we're looking at a player who's 18 years old here. Obviously, Zirkzee joined the club, I think, was 23 when he made the move. And of course, Man United have signed younger players in the past. Højlund's a good example from last summer. But as we've kind of really stressed and laboured on in this episode, there's a lot of kind of older players that have really held Man United back. It's not really just older players, but it's kind of like players in their mid-20s, like, Mason Mount, who had injury concerns before he joined the club. Amrabat, is a player who very decent at a decent level in Italy, but, he's not exactly one who's going to, suddenly become an even better player at the age of 27, and other players like that. So it's interesting that Man United have kind of turned their attention to that. Obviously, Radcliffe probably played a large part in that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ten Hag did as well, because kind of look at the players that he picked last season for Man United. Even when he did have, full squads to pick from, he did tend to kind of favour younger players. That's probably due to his own background as a youth coach. He kind of made his name actually as a youth coach at Bayern Munich before obviously moving back to Holland and make his name as a senior head coach there. He obviously favours and he prefers working with young players who, probably more willing to listen to his ideas, probably more willing to listen to his coaching, probably more willing to try new ideas in terms of tactics and the way that he's trying to develop them as young players. So it makes sense that he, when, push came to shove at Man United, he did kind of turn to youth players, academy players, and we've seen a lot of them kind of thrive under him at Man United. So it's maybe, obviously Ten Hag was seen as a huge liability for Man United last season, but he may actually end up proving to be quite an asset for them when they go out to sign these players, because Man United can rightfully turn around to a guy like Yoro or Zirkzee and say, we might not be in the Champions League, we might not be competing for the Champions League right now, but we have a head coach who does prioritise giving minutes to young players, and it's somewhere you can come and develop. Now, of course, Man United aren't a development club, they're not a stepping stone club, but that's the first step you have to do before you build a long-term squad. So yeah, it's an interesting change in transfer tactics, but I think it's one that might work out quite well for Man United in the long run.
Make sure to check that player profile down in the description from our colleague Ewan, telling you all about Leny Yaro. Let us know in the comments as well your thoughts on this signing for Manchester United and the player's decision to make the move. If you want more of these chats over the summer, do hit that subscribe button down below. And as always, thanks for watching.